Red vs. Gray by Sarah Mailey. Deep in the bowels of a forest, far away from human habitations with hummingbird feeders, Rhett Red lived in her sturdily built home with a white picket fence. Mr. and Mrs. Red were extremely proud of their lovely home and very pleased with their family estate nestled high in the trees of their domain. Rhett loved to play with her chipmunk and bird neighbors and with her own brothers and sisters. Sadly, she was not allowed to pass the green bird bath at one end of the land, or the lake point at the other end. Mr. and Mrs. Red were very protective parents and told their children this was for their own safety. Once upon a time, before anyone's memory could recall, someone in the Red family had a colossal disagreement with someone in the Gray family. Ever since, the two families never interacted or uttered the other family's name out loud. The Gray family was a very loud and rambunctious large family that lived high in the trees near a two-legged animal cabin with a hummingbird feeder. Mr. and Mrs. Gray loved their many active children very much and only had one rule. Everyone must stay between the white bird bath and the lake channel mouth. Since the children were constantly busy chewing on two-legged animals' wiring and wooden house parts, none of the Gray children ventured past their boundaries. Gray Gray was the most adventurous child and usually tried to make all of his games as loud as possible, often inviting the neighborhood birds to join the daily pandemonium. Rhett played hide-and-seek in the golden morning sunshine with the chipmunk children and some of her brothers and sisters. That morning she had found the perfect hiding spot in a hole dug into the ground near the bird bath. She called hello to the blue jay and then crawled into the hole. Suddenly there was a great cracking of branches overhead and a thud nearby. The ensuing silence was interrupted by a small squeak that was decidedly not one of the chipmunk or red children's squeak, so she tried to peek without moving out of her great hiding spot. Slowly, a pair of very light ears rose from the fallen leaves and branches. She gasped when she saw it was a Gray that had fallen near her hidden spot on the ground. Their eyes met, and the world's gravity seemed to change focus. Instead of gravity holding her to the ground, it was holding her eyes to the owner of the very light gray ears. She had never seen such an attractive gray face and glittering eyes and nose. Actually, she'd never seen any of her playmates with so many torn leaves stuck to their fur either, so she couldn't help giggling. The embarrassed gray leafy squirrel focused on the giggling spot and was shocked when the golden sun seemed to have emerged from the ground. His masculine instincts took over for a moment, and he thought, whoa. Then he realized that she must be a forbidden red, and he panicked and ran away as fast as he could. Rhett sighed and was turning to head back into her hiding spot when she heard a rustle and saw a chipmunk child disappearing over a log. She knew that she was in trouble because she knew from experience that the chipmunk children were all such tattletales. Besides, it was pointless to try and chase any chipmunk down since none of the Reds could ever catch them in games of tag anyways. Since she knew what trouble was waiting for her at home, Red took her time and decided to relax a bit before going home. She daydreamed of the squirrel with light gray fur and wondered what he might be doing that very moment. Gray Gray ran fast for what felt like long enough, and then traced his steps back a bit and got a drink from their ornate white bird bath. After his thirst was quenched, he sauntered over and stretched out on his favorite sunning spot, which had already been warmed by the sun. His thoughts drifted back to the luminous red golden beauty he had encountered that morning, and found himself wishing to see her again. Just then the sun went behind a cloud, and he took that as a sign it was time to leave there. He began to wander, and suddenly he found that he was back where he sighted the Red. He had a crazy idea that maybe she would come back to this spot eventually if he waited a while. Sure enough, a little bit later her sleek tail moved through the grass towards the green bird bath. She hopped up, spotted him, and then almost fell off the edge. She cautiously crawled closer for the second time and looked into his eyes. He whispered, "We should run away and live together." Shocked, she didn't know what to say. It was all so sudden that she had no idea what to tell him, but she heard herself say, "Okay." They decided to meet on the far side of the lake the next night where their families wouldn't be able to find them easily. They said goodbye and quickly parted and returned to their homes. When Red got home, surprisingly, her parents were not there waiting to scold her. She realized how lucky she was tonight was an out night, when her parents left to go out and gather food for the family meals for the next week. She found the note the chipmunk child left her parents about the Red and Gray meeting near the green bird bath. Quickly, she chewed it into shredding and saved it to add to her bedding that night. The next morning, Red set out right away when she awoke in case her parents might return from the trip early. Gray also woke up early, but was detained by his brother, who saw him leaving. His brother didn't say anything, but his eyes spoke enough, and Gray went back towards his house. That evening Rhett arrived at their meeting place by the lake and decided she would wait for him there. The sun sank lower in the sky, and still he hadn't arrived. She got up enough courage to ask the geese who were swimming by the shore whether they happened to see him. They had not, but as she was turning around, a wise old goose raised her head high and told her, "Honey, if he isn't here by now, he isn't coming." Not wanting to believe it, she ran away from the geese. Rhett stayed in the trees near the lake and sadly watched the sun sink and turn into a beautiful sunset. After the sun was gone completely, the full moon began to shine its face down on her as she drifted off to sleep. The next morning, she awoke to bitter disappointment because Gray still hadn't shown up. With a heavy heart, she traveled back home through the now familiar long grasses towards her home again. Gray awoke from a horrible nightmare that his lovely Red was in trouble. He worried for a bit, but then put it off as another silly dream. His main thoughts were on how he might get to sneak away and get to his love if she was still at the lake, or maybe meet her if she was coming back. Rhett arrived back in the forest, and then she heard a crack. She looked around, but saw nothing. Another crack, and then she saw him. It was a hunter with a gun, and it was pointed right at her. She squealed and began to scurry through the trees towards home as the bullets whizzed by her. Almost home, Rhett stopped for a moment to fix her fur since it got messed up while she was running, and then continued home. Rhett reached home and felt a bit of relief since she seemed to have lost the hunter. The fur on her back tingled and she turned around. She led the hunter right to her home. Not only was she in danger, but now she'd also put her whole family in danger. Her family filtered out of the house to check out the ruckus, but were scared to death when they spotted the hunter. Rhett squeezed her eyes shut as the hunter pointed his gun directly at her home. Suddenly, there was a noise. She opened her eyes to see Gray. Her family was shocked at his appearance, but didn't argue since he now appeared to be fighting the hunter. After a minute of confusion, Gray finally bit the human in the neck, and the hunter screamed and ran away with his gun. The sound of his crashing gait faded away, and all the animals let out a breath they had been holding. The whole Red family cheered for Gray since he had won a battle with a human. All of the Reds were very thankful that they were now safe from the danger of the human. Red decided this was an excellent time and decided to tell her parents of her love with Gray since they were all happy and pleased with him at the moment. At first they wouldn't accept it, but since he did just save them all, they came to the conclusion that since Gray Gray was such a brave squirrel that he was indeed worthy for their daughter. Just after they agreed, the little chipmunk child came screaming in and began rushing out the story of when he saw Rhett and Gray meeting with each other. Rhett's dad silenced the overexcited chipmunk and sent her away. Rhett was relieved the chipmunk wasn't able to spoil her hopes of being with Gray. In the end, her dreams came true. A few days after the fight, they got married near the channel on neutral ground between the families and made sure to invite all of their forest friends. Except, of course, the tattletale chipmunk.